If you are at all familiar with the gaming landscape, then you have undoubtedly heard the words Dark Souls at some point. Whether that's from a whining game journalist or just through a meme, Dark Souls has become a cultural icon and has quite literally created a new genre of games, Souls-like. But how did Dark Souls become so influential? What did it do to cause it to become such a modern classic? Well, since it's the 10th anniversary of the game's release, I think it's time I tell you what makes Dark Souls such a modern classic. Now listen, if you're watching this video, it either means you know nothing about Dark Souls and you want to learn, you played Dark Souls and have an understanding of the story, or you played Dark Souls and have no clue what even happened. The game presents itself in a very vague way. If you aren't extremely observant, most of the story beats will fly over your head. At the beginning of the game, you get one cutscene, and then a few hours later a snake tells you to link the first flame. Chances are, if this is your first playthrough, you don't know what the heck that is, or what is even happening. Now, if I was a lore channel, I would go through every little detail and explain it, but I'm not. So we're going to do a speed run of this. So in the beginning, the world was ruled by these big dragon dudes called everlasting dragons, and everything was made of stone and stuff. And then suddenly fire kind of just came into existence. When this happened, these four lord guys took a large concentration of this fire and got these things called lord souls, which are just like souls but much more powerful. The main lord, Gwyn, was like, "Hey yo, I'm sick of these dragons, yo," so he made an army and threw lightning at the dragons. Dragons died and Gwyn ushered in the Age of Man. He built castles and stuff, and he did all sorts of wacky things. Anyway, Gwyn learns that the fire that brought him all this cool stuff is starting to die out. So like any good fire maker, he uses his body as kindling. This is what linking the first flame is, but there's also this thing called the undead curse, so when Gwyn burns himself, he doesn't actually die and he said it goes hollow, which means he basically becomes a zombie, so you, the protagonist, are some prisoner in the undead asylum, and you are told that you have to overtake the lords and link the first flame like Gwyn did, and that's where the game starts. Whew, surely I beat some records. Obviously, there's a lot more to the story, and the lore honestly deserves its own video. That's the main idea. If you want more of an explanation, there's plenty of videos explaining the story. But watch the rest of this video first, please. I worked really hard on it, so I'd appreciate There's a lot of moving parts which all contribute to its greatness, so I'm going to split it up into 4 groups: progression, level design, combat, and boss fights. So when you're thrown into Lordran, you have 3 ways you could go: left, right, and behind you. Go left and you're met with some super friendly skeletons that will welcome you and So let's not go left. Instead, let's go to the stairs behind you. You take an elevator and you go down to the main area. You'll see some pretty easy enemies. They shouldn't be so high. Whoa, wait, what? So yeah, you can't hit those guys until later in the game. Okay, well, maybe I just missed something on the left. Let's go back there. So any reasonable person would assume that those areas are just for later. So you head to the right, and what do you find? The enemies are actually manageable. Just in the very first area, the game has told you which way to go. Not with any dialogue or signs to tell you. You learn through your own experience. But if you decide to brute force your way through the catacombs, then you can. There's nothing in the game stopping you aside from your own ability. This philosophy bases your progression in the game on your ability to learn and adapt, and that's pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to the thing all FromSoft games have in common: good level design. Now, when you die in Dark Souls, you are taken back to a bonfire, a sort of checkpoint where you can level up and do other things. Resting at a bonfire refills your Estus flask, which is how you heal, at the cost of enemies respawning. This risk-reward system is amazing on its own, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I just wanted to mention that. Anyway, since bonfires act as a checkpoint, you'd want a lot of them, right? Well, too bad, because most areas only have 1 or 2, and some have none. Let's take one of the first areas as an example, Undeadburg. This area has 1 bonfire, 1 checkpoint. So you play the area, die a few times, and encounter a boss. You beat him, maybe die a few more times, and you find your next bonfire. Ha, psych, there's no bonfire. In fact, the closest one is behind a dragon that can one-shot you. This seems rather unfair, right? Well, if you explore a little bit, you find a ladder, which when kicked down leads you right back to that first bonfire. This shortcut style level design would become a staple of the series, and for good reason. This is good level design. There are countless instances of this happening throughout the game. But there's another thing about the original Dark Souls that helps it with the level design. There is no fast travel for the first half of the game. Now I know this sounds bad, but the game remedies this by having a perfectly interconnected map. For example, back in the Undead Burg, you'll find a little door where, unless you have the master key, you can't unlock. Let's go by the assumption you don't have the key. You play through the game and eventually you stumble upon Darkroot Garden. This area isn't used until much later in the game. But more importantly, there's a different area called Darkroot Basin. This area has some crystal dudes and a hydra, and you'll probably be focused on that, but if you look around, you'll find a door. Open this door and you find Havel the Rock. You'll probably die to him, but when you beat him, if you go up the stairs for a while, you'll find another door. Open the door and look where you popped out.
Editor Plam here, just to make sure you pop out back at Undead Burg. I was gonna put a visual so you would realize that, but my Switch wasn't letting me, download stuff, so I didn't put a visual, but just to make sure you go from Darkroot Basin to Undead Burg, which are like really far away from each other. So yeah, that's the point of that segment. Okay, bye. Editor Plam out.
This kind of interconnection is not really seen in any other games nowadays, including the newer Dark Souls games. But it's because of that interconnection that the lack of fast travel is perfectly manageable. Also, it's cool that you can see Blighttown and the Great Hollow, which are mid-game areas all the way from Firelink, which is the second area in the game. I'm just going to use Dark Souls 3 as a showcase because recording footage on a Switch without a graphics card is the most obnoxiously tedious thing I've ever had the displeasure of doing. It's time to talk about how this game created its own genre, the combat. Honestly, Dark Souls combat is very, very simple. You hit and you dodge. So what makes it special? Well, there's a lot of reasons and we're going to talk about them all. Rolling. So the base of the combat is rolling. Rolling causes iframes and iframes give you a small window of invincibility. The system is simple yet effective. You have to know when to roll, which way to roll, whether you follow up with another roll, whether you attack. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. Healing. Sunny D, Estus flasks, are the primary way of healing in this game. You start an area with a certain amount, either 5, 10, 15, or 20 depending on the kindling level, and you can't get more until the next bonfire. The system is also very simple yet very effective. This forces you to play more conservatively in order not to run out of healing. In combat, especially boss fights, but we'll get to that in a second, maintaining Estus is extremely important. It adds another layer of depth to the combat. Weapons. Any good RPG has a diverse weapon selection, and Dark Souls is no exception. All of the weapons would be even more diverse in the sequels. Having so many options adds even more to the combat. There are daggers, straight swords, great swords, ultra great swords, curved great swords, katanas, piercing swords, axes, great axes, hammers, great hammers, fist claws, spears, halberds, whips, bows, great bows, crossbows, catalysts, flames, and talisman. Clearly there are a lot of options, and each one adds to the already great combat. Those are pretty much the main things that make the combat so unique and fun. But there's one more thing involving combat that deserves its own section. Bosses are the backbone of the Dark Souls games, and by far the most defining feature. Bosses are a test of your ability in most cases. They are infamously hard, so every aspect of the combat must be used and used well. Rolling is an absolute necessity in boss fights. If you don't have rolling down, you will struggle. But bosses in this game aren't just harder enemies. They are what drives the plot of the game, and each boss has their own unique lore. My personal favorite being Artorias the Abysswalker. Not only is the fight itself a near flawless fight, but the lore behind it is one of the best in the game. Okay, if you really care about the story of this game and you haven't played it yet, this is minor spoiler territory. Skip to this timestamp to skip it. The story goes that one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, Artorias, was tasked to fight this strange abyss that was consuming a town known as Ulasil. Artorias and his pet wolf Sif went to Ulasil to stop the source of the abyss and found Manus, father of the abyss. Artorias slays Manus and the abyss is stopped. The story is told by numerous characters throughout the base game, but you don't actually meet Artorias until the DLC. But in the DLC, you find out the truth behind the story. In the DLC, you were taken to the past, and more specifically, you were taken to Ulasil while the Abyss was taking over. But before you go there, you fight the big man himself, Artorias. But this is not the Artorias you heard about. This Artorias is corrupted by the Abyss. His right arm is broken and he can't even speak English anymore. His armor is dirty, his sword is broken, and he's missing his iconic great shield. This is when you realize that the legend of Artorias was a lie. Artorias never stopped Manus. He lost to him. Eventually you fight Manus as the final boss of the DLC, and you realize that you were the one who stopped Manus, not Artorias. This kind of indirect storytelling just adds another layer to the boss fights once you learn about it, and it really makes the experience that much better. So if you skip the spoiler section, the TLDR is that the boss has an extremely interesting story behind it, and knowing that story makes the boss fight way more interesting. But lore is lame. I only care about the action, I hear you say. Well, that's good, because the next example of boss I have is an example of a boss who balances difficulty and fairness perfectly, and is one of the best bosses in the entire Souls series. Ornstein and Smough. ONS is by far the most famous boss of the game, and for good reason. This boss marks the middle of the game and is a true test of strength. This boss is hard, and is really the only boss in the series I still struggle with. And that is because one thing, it's two different bosses in one. You fight both Ornstein and Smough at the same time. Ornstein has quick movements and can close the gap between you and him extremely quickly, while Smough hits hard but lacks good movement. However, both are pretty aggressive. Now that sounds pretty unfair, and it would be if it wasn't for the arena you fight in. When it comes to bosses with multiple enemies, crowd control is extremely important, and it's crowd control that can make or break a good double fight. Let's take the Demon Princes from Dark Souls 3 as an example of a double fight without crowd control. This fight makes it so one of the demons is passive and spits poison while the other is aggressive. This relationship makes it fair yet challenging for the player. The problem with this fight is when both demons become aggressive. Then both are on you at all times and it's very hard to get anything done. You really just have to wait until one becomes passive again. That fight is really good outside of the double aggression, and is one of the better fights in the series. But back on topic, the ONS fight manages the two enemies by having columns in the arena. With these columns you can split aggro and focus on either Ornstein or Smough individually. This makes the fight significantly more fair while maintaining the difficulty, because even with the columns this fight is ruthless. It is really a test to see if you're ready for the second half of the game. Also, this fight is the first fight in the series with a true second phase, which would become a commonplace in the later games. Once you kill either Ornstein or Smough, the other one gets a powered up form, either Mega-sized Ornstein or Lightning Smough. Whichever one you kill last, you can also buy the armor set of. But the thing is, you can only kill them once per game. To get the other armor set, you have to play the game to that point all over again, but in New Game Plus. This creates replayability, and that's always a good thing when it comes to games. Ornstein and Smough is by far the best double fight in the series, and nothing has really come close. Besides Sister Fried, but she really deserves her own video. The boss fights in Dark Souls are really the backbone of the game. They can be used as a storytelling device or a test of skill. They are showcases of good design and good craftsmanship and are really a staple of the Souls series. Let's talk about where Dark Souls gets its reputation for a second. Its difficulty. Game journalists just love to talk about this game's difficulty. If a different, unrelated game is kinda hard, it's the Dark Souls of that genre. Not to mention the constant articles that are being written that beg for an easy mode on Dark Souls. Okay, I don't know about that last one, but regardless, people love to talk about how hard this game is. Now I'm not one of those people who, in response to any criticism of this game, simply says get good. I think there's a legitimate argument for an easy mode in some games, but Dark Souls is different. This game puts you against seemingly impossible odds, and the difficulty enforces that idea. In the Dark Souls universe, you are a random dude against some of the strongest beings in the world. Because of that, beating a hard boss in this game is one of the best feelings in any video game. You truly feel like you conquered the odds through pure skill, unless you got carried by phantoms. And by the end of the game, when you finally slay the final boss, you feel truly accomplished. You feel like your journey was actually fulfilling. You conquered the odds, you bested every challenge that came your way, and you have the armor sets, the weapons, the upgrades, and the stats to prove it. And that final boss is a chance to show off everything you've accomplished throughout the course of the game. And once you see that final cutscene and watch the credits roll, it truly feels like a proper finale to a grand adventure. And all of that is because you earned it through the difficulty. So let's just add an easy mode and tear down everything I just said. An easy mode isn't bad because you should struggle with Dark Souls. It's bad because it destroys one of the fundamental elements of the game. Also, if you're somewhat competent at similar kinds of games, you should adapt relatively quickly, and you shouldn't have that much of a problem with this game. Dark Souls is never unfair. Dark Souls is mostly never unfair. It simply wants to give you the feeling of triumph that we all crave. After playing Dark Souls in the midst of 2020, it quickly overtook Breath of the Wild and became my favorite game of all time. And that title is likely to stick for a long time. I love everything about this game. The setting, the characters, the combat, the story, the level design, everything. I just can't get enough of this game. I quickly played Dark Souls 2 soon after I beat the original, and I have over 200 plus hours on Dark Souls 3. And of course I played Sekiro, which I may or may not be making a video on later. And I cannot wait to see what Elden Ring brings to the table. So far it looks like it could become a new favorite. Dark Souls is the perfect example of good game design, and no other game has ever matched its excellence. It truly is, at the end of the day, a masterpiece. Thank you for watching.
What up? Thanks for watching the video. I just wanted to say a few things before it ended. One, you probably can tell that I have a better mic than I did before, like during the video, and that's, because I recorded it, and then I bought this mic, and I didn't have time to re-record it, and I didn't want to. So this is like the new mic, the future mic, so you won't be hearing the bad one anymore, just, for the, Also, I don't know if you could also tell, but this video is slightly rushed, mostly because I wanted to hit the due date really bad, and my, downloading like 30-second clips from the Switch, on your phone and then emailing it to your computer so you can put it in the editing software. It takes so dang long, and I didn't really feel like it, so if it seemed like the visuals were kind of lame, then that's why. In the future, I probably won't be talking about that many Switch games, because taking footage from Switch games is just the worst thing you can do without a capture card. Also, this content is going to be kind of like the main thing for the channel now. So if you like that, then that's good for you. If you don't, then that sucks. I will keep doing like the podcasts and stuff, but like, this is going to be like the main thing of my channel. And I'll try to put one of these kind of essay style videos out once a month if I can. That's like the goal right now, but I don't know how well it's going to go. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.